Okay, in question 6, we have a new line that we call long run aggregate supply. Long run aggregate supply is a vertical line that passes through the short aggregate supply curve and the aggregate demand curve. So we have long run aggregate supply, short aggregate supply, and aggregate demand. Then of course we have price level over here and real GDP down here. Now the GDP is still determined by the intersection of aggregate demand, right here, the downward sloping line, and short run aggregate supply. So GDP, if you look, is just less than potential GDP. Potential GDP is this vertical line. It does not depend on price level because it is essentially determined by real factors such as the size of a nation's land and quantity of resources, the amount in the short run, the amount that is fixed right now in physical capital, roads, bridges, computer networks, and technology. So given our state of technology, capital, physical capital, land and resources, that determines how much GDP should be produced in the short run if all resources are fully employed. Okay, and then the GDP is the intersection right there. Okay, and it's just slightly less. Okay, so this is potential GDP. This is long run aggregate supply. And then this is the short run aggregate supply curve. And this is the aggregate demand curve. Okay, so to find GDP, we have to solve those two equations simultaneously. And I did that down here for you. Now, this is a cool tool you can use. If you want to verify that, it's cool. You can verify it right here. I'm going to copy this and drop it into Desmos. Okay. Okay, let me move this down. Okay, there's the equation. Let me grab the short aggregate supply curve. Okay. So there's aggregate demand, there's aggregate supply. Okay, and then I'll move this back to where it was. I think right about here, right? Okay, but we don't see the aggregate demand curve, do we? So we have to go over here, click on Tools, and for the x-axis, let's just try some numbers. Let's go 0 to, let's go 0 to, I don't know, 30. Okay? And then the y-axis, well, remember the intercept is 29.1. So for the y-axis, we're going to do 0 to 30. See what happens. Okay, cool. That looks good right there, right? Awesome. There's our aggregate demand and aggregate supply equations. Notice aggregate demand meets aggregate supply at what? It meets it at the equilibrium, and GDP is 18.593, and the price level is 19.803, and that's exactly what we get here. GDP is 18.593, and equilibrium price level is 19.8. Okay? And I guess I rounded it to 2 decimal places, right? 19.80 would be rounded to 2 decimal places. Okay? Now the output gap, let's go ahead and graph this here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and graph. Let me pull this over here. Got black, pin. We'll go medium. Remember, this is the price level, right? This is aggregate demand. This is short run aggregate supply. This is long run aggregate supply. The GDP's right, the equilibrium's right there, just to the left of, left of long run aggregate supply. That's real GDP, right? So GDP's down here at 18.593. So 18.593. Long run aggregate supply is what? Remember, long run aggregate supply was 18.997. So long run aggregate supply is 18 point, what did I say, 997? The price level is the price level is 19.8, right? 19.8. Okay, so we're in output gap. To find the output gap, you take real GDP, 18.593, and you subtract off potential GDP, 18.997. Okay? So that's how you'd graph it. I'm going to go ahead and erase everything. And I'm going to grab the value of potential GDP. Okay, so this is potential GDP, right? So this is YP, potential GDP. Real GDP is given. We go to Desmos.com, and real GDP is the first number, 15.593. Which is given to us in the problem here, right? Real GDP is that number. Okay, and the output gap is just real GDP minus potential, which is $0.404 trillion. So the output gap is $0.404 trillion. We got that right. Now, if you go back to the original problem, it says the fiscal budget is balanced. That means taxes equal government spending, and the fiscal budget is T minus G, and because it's balanced, that must mean it's equal to 0. Okay, so the fiscal budget, taxes minus government spending, is 0. By assumption. So that's 0. Right? Okay, because GDP right here GDP is less than potential, the economy is inside its production possibility frontier. GDP is less than potential, right? at the equilibrium, that means the unemployment rate is greater than the natural rate of unemployment. If GDP equals potential, then the unemployment rate should equal the natural rate. Okay, but this is the case now. Real GDP is less than potential. Real GDP is less than potential. That means unemployment is high. We're not using all of our resources to produce the GDP level that we should be. So this down here is the unemployment rate is less than the natural unemployment rate. Is below, we'll try below. Oh, sorry. Let me go back. Make sure I get this right. GDP is less than potential, right? GDP is here and potential is here. So GDP is less than the potential GDP level or full employment level. So that means unemployment is greater than the natural rate. Okay, I'm just making sure you're paying attention. Let's scroll up. So this should be greater than, right? Greater than. I just messed it up in my head. Greater than or above. There we go. Greater than or above. So I can delete this now. Okay, now in scenario 2, scenario 2 says, in the absence of all government interventions, no Fed, no food stamps, no unemployment insurance, a blank rate causes nominal wages to blank. So, in the absence of all government interventions, when unemployment is high, down here unemployment's high, unemployment is high. When unemployment's high, that means what? People are looking for work. They're desperate. There's no food stamps, no unemployment insurance. There's nothing to stimulate the economy. So when that's the situation, wages get bid down. Also, prices of other production inputs falls because when unemployment is high, factories aren't running at full capacity. So if they're not running at full capacity, that means they're not using much energy. If they're not using much energy, that means there's lower demand for energy and lower prices. So these two things cause short and aggregate supply to decrease. Increase. Short and aggregate supply increases, aggregate marginal cost decreases. Right? You go from black to red. So vertically, you go down. That's a decrease in aggregate marginal cost. When you go sideways, that's an increase in short and aggregate supply. So this causes short and aggregate supply to increase. Okay. So this must be unemployment. Unemployment rate, right? What is the unemployment rate? High. A high unemployment rate causes nominal wages to decrease. Let's see if that works. And it does, right? It does work. Okay. So let's just review. In the absence of government intervention, a high unemployment rate causes nominal wages to decrease. Why? Because people are desperate for work, right? And when they're desperate for work, they'll work for less. Okay? So let's go ahead and label the diagram. Again, this is the price level, right? Price level, GDP, aggregate demand. The first one is short run aggregate supply, right? Scenario 1. The other one is short run aggregate supply 2. And then the vertical line, this right here is long run aggregate supply, right? And the decrease the increase in short run aggregate supply was caused by wages falling, right? Wages fell, right? Because unemployment was high. High unemployment, right? So what happened to the price level? You can barely kind of see it, but and GDP is equal to potential here, right? GDP is equal to potential now. So GDP was low, you can barely see it. GDP was low, now it's equal to potential. And the price level fell, right? The price level fell and GDP increased, right? So this is called the self-correcting mechanism. The self-correcting mechanism. We get a decrease of prices along the aggregate demand curve, and that is associated with an increase in GDP. All right, so that's how that works. Okay. Okay, to find the new equilibrium, you set the new short run aggregate supply curve, the red one, equal to the initial aggregate demand curve, the black downward sloping line, right there. You solve for GDP and you get $18.997 trillion. To find the equilibrium price level, you substitute this value into the new short run aggregate supply curve, or the original aggregate demand curve. Okay? And I calculate it for you. It's 19.6. Now notice that GDP now is equal to what? GDP now is equal to potential, right? Because the new short aggregate supply curve and aggregate demand cross at long run aggregate supply. So the output gap, potential GDP, is equal to real GDP. So the output gap is 0. Right? The fiscal budget is still balanced, right? Because the government did nothing. It didn't raise taxes, it didn't cut taxes, and it didn't increase government spending. So the fiscal budget is still balanced. The unemployment rate is equal to the natural rate of unemployment, right? The natural unemployment rate. Why is that? Because remember, now real GDP equals potential GDP, or full employment output, and that means we should expect the unemployment rate to be equal to the natural rate of unemployment. Okay, and that's what we did right here. We got that right there. See that? Okay, so I'm going to erase that. I'll go ahead and hit enter and see if we get the right answers. And yeah, we got the right answers. Okay. From scenario 1 to scenario 2, real GDP, what did real GDP do? Real GDP goes from a low level to a high level. So real GDP increased. Oh, and by the way, I misspelled that. Unemployment, right? So real GDP increased by blank percent, right? The price level, what did the price level do? The price level falls along the aggregate demand curve from a high level to a low level, right? So the price level decreased, right? Now we got to figure out by what percentages, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to move this over here. And this is going to be the price level. And this is scenario 1, and we need a scenario 2, right? So let's go back and get the scenario 1 price level. Scenario 1 price level is 19.8. Right? Now we need the scenario 2 GDP and price level. Scenario 2 GDP and price level is 18.997 and 19.6. So price level is 19.6. And in scenario 2, potential GDP is still 18.997. And because of the self-correcting mechanism, high unemployment causing wages to fall, GDP rises to equal potential. So you've got to calculate the percent change now, right? So what it is in scenario 2 minus what it was in scenario 1 divided by what it was in scenario 1 times 100, right? For the inflation rate, it's what it is in scenario 2 minus what it was in scenario 1 divided by what it was in scenario 1 times 100. And so the price level or GDP increases, real GDP increased by 2.173%. Prices fell by 1.01%. We don't need the negative, and I think this is 2 decimal places. Okay, we'll hit enter and see what we got. We got all but one answer correct, right? Now, the economy depicted in scenario 1 is in what kind of gap? When GDP is low, like it is here, and low means less than potential. So when GDP right here is less than potential, we're in a recessionary gap. And it looks like we got all the correct answers. So, whoop, recessionary. That's weird. Should be recessionary. Okay, there's a problem with the algorithm. I'll fix it. It should be recessionary. Let me fix it real quick. Okay, it should have been, was in a recessionary gap. So let's try that. And we got all the answers correct, so we're good to go. Okay? Sorry. A recessionary gap. And then if we hit enter, we get it right. Cool. All right. Thank you.